So I've noticed a lot of popularity on right to repair activism, and I think this is interesting. The right to repair, this reflects something in late capitalism, as you may call it. Some people call it neo-fascism. Some people call it just imperialist socialism. Or monopoly capitalism, or finance capitalism. There's a million terms for the state that we're in, and it's an interesting state. But one of its characteristics is monopolization, and in the classic capitalist economy, the Marxist one. Now, if you've studied Marx, what I'm telling you, you've already heard before, but I still think it's worth explaining. In a competitive capitalist economy, the only source of value on average, in aggregate, in the long term, in commodity production, is the exploitation of labor. It is paying workers less than the value of their labor. And this is something that you can prove mathematically in an airtight way. Nobody has ever disproven this because it's basically just reality. And you have to start with this. So in this monopolized system, step 2, Marx again proves how, but we see how monopolization happens over time. And it's not what the libertarians think. It's not regulatory capture. Just the opposite, in fact. Because for the capitalists, the most optimal thing that they can possibly do is band together in their own interests and use their combined power to take advantage of the working class, take advantage of the people, and so that's what they do over time. It's not that complicated. These are not individual and separate, self-interested actors seeking to sabotage each other. They're brothers, they're partners who just happen to be competing for a time. And when they're competing, of course, then we get the classical capitalism. But when they're not competing, when they're in a cartel, that's when they can overcharge for the price of the goods. And they charge monopoly rent, as it's called, when they monopolize the market and charge extra for the good. You're not paying for the cost of production, you're paying an extra premium just for access to the product in the first place. And that premium, that rent that's being extracted, is now the primary form of value creation, so-called, or GDP creation in our economy. When you look at the largest sectors of our GDP, what do you see? You see finance, insurance, real estate, and you see how much of our value is produced by the printing of fiat currency. You can see, okay, we are in a rentier economy. We're not in an industrial capitalist economy anymore. And for that reason, repairability ceases to be a value. In a non-monopolized economy, repairability is a true value. Repairability is something that will make people buy one thing over another. But that's not what we have here, because the same financial interests are pulling the strings behind all of these different brands and companies that we see. And so, this being the case, the need to extract more rent through the charges for repair. You know, you're not paying for the repair labor, you're paying for access to the repair person in addition to the repair labor, right? The parts, you know, you're paying for access to the parts via the company as proxy. Your software is locked down, so you're paying rent on digital services, you're paying rent on cloud services, proprietary services, as opposed to paying for the actual cost of running the cloud service itself. So the entire model of modern economics with digital devices is a key part of the rentier economy, undoubtedly. And to understand this shift, you might say, well, then ought we to be libertarians and to say we should go back? no, this is exactly what I just explained. If you were listening, monopolization happens because it is in the interests of the capitalist class, who combined are more influential and more powerful than the government, than the state. And the reason why this problem occurs is something that you can't resolve through mere democracy. A lot of libertarians will say we'll prevent monopolization through democracy. No, it's not. Democracy is not enough. What you need is what I would call the only type of effective democracy, which is a dictatorship of the proletariat, a people's dictatorship. It is a government by, of, and for the people, truly to the point where that which offends the people, that which goes against our tastes and desires, that can be controlled and stopped. And these things that everybody hates, like universal health care not existing, instead we pay and deal with these ridiculous healthcare systems. Everybody hates this. Nobody likes this, but it still happens. That's because our democracy is not a functioning, true democracy. It's not a people's dictatorship. It is a bourgeois dictatorship. And so we can't have democracy through bourgeois dictatorship. The only way to restore the kernel of the true libertarian state, which allows for this market competition to exist, is to have a Chinese system. What China does allows them to preserve this classical capitalist model. And Sam, you might say, doesn't that mean they're not socialists since they allow for exploitative wage labor to exist in their country? No, it's actually, this is part of their socialist growth plan. They are using this as a means to capture foreign productive resources, both intellectual and technical resources, in order to reproduce the capitalist inventions, reproduce capitalist modernity in a sense, not in the intellectual sense, but of modern society. And this has been a rapid growth engine that they used, which the Soviets actually may have used the exact same mechanism if there wasn't this great threat of invasion that forced them to implement war communism and abandon the NEP. It's quite entirely possible that the Soviet economy would have followed the Chinese path. What's interesting about all this is the fact that the libertarians must inevitably realize that the thing they hate the most, communism, the thing they fear the most, dictatorship, is the only way that they have to preserve the semblance of the libertarian system, which they like so much. There is no alternative for this. And to put a sharp point on this, to make this the most crystal clear it could possibly be, the American Communist Party in our program calls for the abolition of intellectual property. As extreme as this sounds, that is exactly what we call for. That is exactly what we believe in. And in fact, when you look at the Soviet-produced electronics and hardware, it is built to last. It's stuff that still works today because it was built to last. It's some of the heaviest and craziest stuff because the government doesn't want to pay for a new one. The government just wants it to last. The people's state produces goods that are the most repairable. So if you really support right to repair, my opinion is to be a communist. The communists are the most pro-repair people in the universe. And the people who are more moderate and liberal in their approach to this, they're missing the forest for the trees. They're swimming against the tide. They think that the sort of European open source movement is going to drive this. No, that's against the way of things. That's against the direction that things move economically. You've got to look higher. You've got to understand the bigger picture.